3 years after coming home, I jumped. My spirit drifted above the scene, waiting to witness the tears and regret from the family who had always looked down on me. Instead, my father merely shook his head at my broken body, muttering, "How childish." My mother's tight lips relaxed into a relieved sigh. My brother moved to shield the fake daughter from the gruesome sight, though she still burst into tears, drawing the family's immediate comfort and embrace. I hovered there, stunned, before letting out a bitter laugh. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day I first returned home. Realizing I'd been given a second chance, I sat in silence as my parents spoke with tear-stained eyes about their decade of longing and guilt. In my previous life, I'd broken down sobbing and thrown myself into their arms, naive enough to believe I'd finally found love and family. 3 years later, I was frantically tearing at my hair as I jumped to my death before them, hoping to trade my life for even a sliver of their affection. But no one had ever truly loved me. So this time, I felt nothing. I sat still as stone while my mother tried to coax me, "Sweetie, still adjusting. It's okay, Mom will help you pick any room you'd like." She led me to the 3rd floor, my father following with a smile as he called my brother Lucas, who dismissed him with a single word, "Busy." "Your brother practically runs the company now," my mother explained awkwardly. "He'll be back on the weekend." I'd believed that excuse in my last life. This time, I didn't care enough to question it. Every room upstairs was a teenage girl's dream, bright and welcoming. My eyes locked onto the one nearest the stairs, where a fluffy panda sat on the bed. In my previous life, drawn to its charm and believing in my parents' love, I'd chosen it immediately. My parents exchanged glances before hurriedly explaining, "Dawn, that's your sister Nina's room. She thoughtfully cleared it out to give you options, but you should really take the largest one." Back then, I'd blinked gratefully. "She's letting me have her room. How kind." I still loved that panda, still wanted that room. But before my parents could protest further, I'd already rushed in to hug the stuffed animal. That's when Nina returned. We were both 15, but she carried herself with a maturity I lacked. Seeing me in her room, she forced a dimpled smile. "I left school early when I heard you were home. You like this room, sister? It's yours if you want it." She bit her lip and turned away, every subtle change in her expression noted by our parents. My mother quickly tried to pull me out. "Dawn, let's pick another. This one isn't suitable." "Why not?" I sensed the shift in atmosphere but couldn't understand it then. My parents had shed tears for me, showing such love. Nina had offered her room. I was their biological daughter. Wasn't it natural to pick a room I liked? Before anyone could answer, Lucas stormed in and dragged me from my reading to the doorway. "Have you no shame?" he snarled. "This is Nina's room. How dare you steal her nest like a cuckoo?" I froze, not just at my first sight of my brother, but at my inability to understand how I was the thief here. When I called for our parents, Lucas turned on them. "How could you allow this? Aren't you hurting Nina with such favoritism?" They twisted their faces, speechless, and I caught my mother's flash of anger directed at me. I knew that look well from my late foster father. Mom was angry at me. So I really was the cuckoo. A cuckoo perches carefully on wire, enduring year after year until finally, it jumps. How foolish it was. This life, I won't make the same mistakes. I won't fight or grab, won't cry or make a fuss. And most importantly, I won't waste my love on them. With a faint, knowing smile, I pointed to the smallest room at the far end. "I want that one." My parents started, then showed poorly hidden relief while pretending to protest. "That's just storage. Pick again. I'm used to small spaces. They feel safer." They sighed but agreed, just like the consenting to their long-lost daughter living in a storage room after 10 years apart. Nina appeared then, shocked to see me entering the storage space. I glanced at her, unmoved. She thought I didn't know about her trap, the deliberately placed panda, the calculated offer of her room. She'd spent 3 years competing with me for our family's love, and won completely. And I, through death, learned one lesson: the best way to receive love is to love yourself. I closed the door to my new room as Nina offered the panda. "Sister, I'm sure you'll like this." "I don't like stuffed animals, but thank you," I answered through the door, unpacking my books from the countryside. The moment I was reborn, I had a plan. Self-love takes many forms for me now. It meant excelling in my studies and gaining independence. "Sister, do you hate me?" "I understand. I'm the one who stole your nest." Nina's words outside were performative, meant for our listening parents. Sure enough, our mother rushed to comfort her. "Your sister's just tired, don't overthink it." Father added, "Nina, no one here is a cuckoo." But there was. It was me. Later, after a nap, I found the villa quiet. The housekeeper mentioned the young miss was upset, so our parents took her shopping. I nodded. It was nothing new. I began organizing my red envelopes, monetary gifts from family when they brought me home, totaling over 100,000 yuan. I needed to save every cent. My future wouldn't be easy, and this money was my greatest asset. With the bank card the village chief had helped me obtain, I headed to the nearby bank. My past life's 3 years of suffering had at least taught me the local geography. There I encountered a sharp-dressed man leaving with the fawning bank manager. I stopped short. It was Lucas, my brother. Our first meeting in this life, though he knew me from photos and videos. He looked me up and down coldly. Don Lu. I nodded. The manager's eyes lit up. Miss, how do you know Mr. Lu? Lucas frowned. That's none of your concern. Get back to work. As the manager scurried away, Lucas turned back to me. You just got home. What are you doing here? Depositing money. I answered simply and moved to get my number. Depositing money. The red envelope money. Lucas's contempt dripped from every word. I expected you'd let mom and dad hold onto it like Nina always does. I met his scorn with silence. Greedy at such a young age, he sneered. Keep your hands on your own money if you must, but don't you dare touch the family's wealth. History was repeating itself perfectly. In my previous life, during my first week home, a gold necklace had vanished. Lucas immediately branded me the thief, convinced I was nothing but an ill-bred troublemaker obsessed with money. Now, in this second chance at life, he'd already condemned me before any necklace could even go missing. I didn't bother arguing. His opinion meant nothing to me now. I simply continued toward the counter. Lucas snorted and stalked away. That evening, the family gathered to help me choose a school. They spread out glossy brochures from prestigious private academies, but I had already made my choice. I want to attend Suzhou First Public High School. It was a top-ranked public school and the perfect vessel for my escape plan. Complete high school, ace the college entrance exam, and leave this family behind. I had no interest in playing the pampered heiress. My parents exchanged shocked glances. Nina quickly masked her delight as she protested, Sister, we don't need regular high schools. We don't even take the college entrance exam. We're destined for overseas universities. Yes, Dawn, join your sister at Purple Gold Academy. We'll arrange everything for your future, my mother added, patting my hand with false warmth. My father's eyes flickered with calculation. I knew exactly what worried him. In my previous life, I had attended Purple Gold Academy and became infamous not for shining, but for sticking out like a sore thumb. A rough-edged country girl among Suzhou's polished elite. When word spread that I was the Lu family's daughter, I became the season's favorite joke. People came to gawk at me, finding only a dark, skinny village girl who couldn't possibly be the heir they'd imagined. Nina had orchestrated my downfall masterfully, not only encouraging others to bully me but also sending a handsome boy to pursue me. After I'd fallen for his practiced sweet talk, he publicly released our private conversations and moments. I became everyone's favorite punchline, bringing shame to the Lu family name. My father had slapped me to the ground in his fury. We knew letting you attend an elite school would end like this. You've completely disgraced our family. Face was everything to him, and I had shredded his to pieces. Now, watching him weigh the same concerns, I knew his thoughts. Nina could uphold the family's dignity, but could this rough-edged stranger they called daughter? I prefer public school. Please let me attend Suzhou first, I stated firmly. My mother began to protest, but father cut her off. Enough. Let the child choose. If we love her, we shouldn't force her. I nearly laughed at the irony but swallowed it down. The unborn laughter curdled into a familiar bitterness in my heart. Life at Suzhou First began, and after 2 weeks of commuting to this deliberately chosen school the furthest from home, I made my move. I'd like to board at school. The dinner table fell silent. Lucas, home for once, fixed me with a suspicious glare. Boarding? Dawn, why are you so determined to distance yourself? You've been home for over 2 weeks, still not adjusted. How could I adjust? 3 years hadn't been enough last time. It's better for studying, I replied with practiced neutrality. Lucas's eyes narrowed to slits, but he held his tongue. My mother reached for my hand. Dawn, is something bothering you? I feel like you're not connecting with us. Yes, we weren't connecting. That's why distance would be a mercy for us all. It's just about academics, I repeated. Nina's eyes filled with perfectly timed tears. Sister, you must hate me, right? Don't board, I'll go instead. I'll disappear from your sight. She rose to pack, her performance flawless. I smiled inwardly. Nina was getting desperate. For 2 weeks, she'd tried every trick to provoke or frame me. But I remained passive, like an otter gliding through water untouchable. She couldn't find purchase to begin her manipulation. Now, seeing an opportunity, she launched into her rehearsed retreat. Anyone but a fool could see through her act. Our parents and brother saw it too, but they didn't care. Their hearts were already hers. Lucas set down his chopsticks with authority. Nina, sit down. You're not going anywhere. Sniffling delicately, Nina obeyed. My father seized the moment to grant my request. If Dawn wants to board, let her. It's not a big deal. Indeed it wasn't. I'd lived away from home in my previous life too. More specifically, in a tiny rental apartment near school. Back then, after Nina's relentless provocations and accusations, my younger self had finally snapped. We'd fought, tumbling down the stairs. I'd emerged unscathed, but Nina's theatrical head wound had bled beautifully. I'd thought I'd won until our family came running. That's when I'd learned how completely I'd lost. My mother had cradled Nina, crying with genuine concern. My father had grabbed me with barely contained rage. Dawn, what's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Lucas, home by cruel coincidence, had kicked me without hesitation. Do you think you're still in the countryside? Who said you could fight like a wild dog? Apologized to Nina. Their fury had poured down like acid rain. I'd apologized through my terror while Nina had cried and packed her bags. She'd played her trump card. I didn't like her, so she would move out and leave the home to her sister. Of course, the family hadn't allowed it, begging her to stay. I'd stood there, numb, until Lucas's harsh words had shattered my illusions. You made the mistake. Don't you have anything to say? You should be the one to leave. This home only has room for Nina. That moment had awakened me to the truth behind their careful glances and unspoken words. They'd wanted me to volunteer to leave. The realization had struck like lightning, illuminating everything for this late-blooming girl. Now, in this second chance, I climbed the stairs to pack before they could suggest it. I would move out early, just as they all wished. I rented a small apartment near Suzhou first, instead of living in the school dorms. The lone housekeeper helped me settle in, her confusion evident. Young miss, are your parents comfortable with you living here alone? Why haven't they come to help? Of course they hadn't come. Nina was upset again, commanding their full attention and concern. Seeing my silence, the housekeeper attempted awkward comfort. They must be busy. They'll visit once they're free. Her words proved hollow prophecy. My parents and brother never came to see me. My mother managed one phone call. Dawn, have you settled in? Oh, I'm so worried about you living alone out there. I assured her I was fine. She sighed a few more times, but had nothing else to say. Without true love, what words could fill the void? After hanging up, I surveyed my tiny sanctuary and felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Finally, I was free of playing the cuckoo in their nest. Life simplified itself to a clean geometry, eating, sleeping, studying 3 points of a triangle that needed no family complications to complete it. They seemed to prefer this arrangement too. In over a month since I'd moved out, my phone remained silent. It was as if we'd all agreed to play dead to each other. Then fate threw Nina into my path. Walking home from school, I spotted her leading a pack of motorcycles through the streets, their engines shattering the evening peace. The sight stopped me cold. The perfect family's princess playing delinquent queen. If our parents knew their precious daughter was racing motorcycles like a common thug. She noticed me, gunning her engine to stop inches from where I stood. Before I could speak, she pulled off her helmet, studying me with amused contempt. Dawn, long time no see. I acknowledged her with the barest sound. She flipped her hair with practiced coolness, folding her arms as she asked, have Mom and Dad called you even once? I shook my head. Her lips curled as she asked the real question, want to know why? I shook my head, though the answer hardly mattered. Nina's lips curved into a knowing smile. They wanted to call you, really. But every time they tried, I'd start crying. They had to consider my feelings, you see. But that's not the main reason they're angry with you. I absorbed her words in silence, my face a careful mask. You've been home all this time, Nina continued, barely containing her glee, but you've shown no affection for Mom, Dad, or your brother. Did you think they wouldn't resent that? I never expected victory to come so easily. I was terrified of you at first, afraid of losing my place when you returned. But look what happened, you handed everything over and left on your own. I really must thank you. Her eyes studied my face intently as she spoke, probing for reactions, testing whether I was naturally foolish or deliberately stepping aside. The predator trying to understand her prey. I wanted to laugh at her desperate need to know. Little sister, doesn't this exhausting performance tire you? I need to go. I adjusted my bag, turning toward my apartment. One of her bikers called out, Nina, who's that? Oh, just my convenient parents' precious daughter, she replied with casual disdain. The biker whistled uneasily. Careful how you talk about Mr. and Mrs. Liu. Whatever. Nina turned away, mask slipping to reveal her true feelings. Clearly, she held no respect for our parents. Perhaps no love either. I felt a bitter smile form. Mom, Dad, you're the truly pitiful ones in this game. During summer break of my freshman year, I returned home to find an empty house. The pool cleaner informed me the family had left for a beach vacation the previous day. Didn't the master and madam tell you? His confusion mirrored what I should have felt. I left without answering, but halfway home, Mom's WeChat message arrived. Dawn, we're planning a beach vacation, at least 2 weeks. Your mischievous sister has been begging for it. Want to join? I stared at the message, savoring its absurdity. They were already at the beach, sending this performative invitation now. After careful consideration, I replied with deliberate innocence, yes, I'll come. The long silence before her response spoke volumes. Oh Dawn, then hurry home within half an hour. Your muddle-headed father got the flight times wrong, we need to leave immediately. Half an hour. The villa was in East City, Suzhou first in the west, even a taxi would take nearly an hour. My mother's clever deflection almost deserved applause. I won't make it back in time. You all go ahead. I found myself smiling. Smiling at what? The perfect choreography of it all, perhaps. I didn't waste the summer wallowing. Instead, I threw myself into studying, hiring tutors to prepare for the college entrance exam. My days filled with books and learning. When exhaustion crept in, I'd check social media, watching my family's carefully curated happiness scroll by. Mom's posts told their own story, 9 photo grids with 1 obligatory shot of her with Dad, 1 artistic back view of Lucas, and 7 glamorous shots of Nina surfing, helicoptering, jet skiing, yacht posing. So fashionable, so beautiful. Unlike their plain bookworm in her school uniform. But jealousy no longer touched me. Gone were the days when I'd timidly call after being left behind, asking if they'd forgotten me. Now, I simply liked their posts, all of them, wishing them the happiness they'd found without me. My grades climbed steadily until I reached the top 10. In high school, academic success draws attention, and I found myself receiving an unexpected love letter. A boy praised my grades, called me pretty, mentioned my fair skin. I stared at the letter in confusion. Pretty? Me? Fair-skinned? Do I look fair-skinned to you? I asked my desk mate. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Stop fishing for compliments. You know you're fair. Borrowing her mirror, I really looked at myself for the first time in months. The reflection surprised me. Fair skin had replaced my former sallow complexion. My once gaunt features had filled out, gaining an unexpected elegance. Could it be that learning to love myself had transformed more than just my heart? My eyes grew unexpectedly wet. Damn, my desk mate exclaimed, are you crying because you're too beautiful? As my grades improved and my appearance evolved, my dreams expanded. Especially in senior year, I began imagining myself as a powerful businesswoman, standing at the peak of success, commanding attention through achievement rather than pleading for love. My past life seemed absurd now, 3 years wasted in desperate pursuit of family affection, begging for love from parents, and a brother who had none to give. Until finally, on my 18th birthday, I jumped thinking death might earn what life could not. 18 was significant, and I knew this new 18th birthday would bring its own drama. Right on cue, Mom called early that morning, our first contact in 6 months, since the New Year's Eve invitation I'd declined in favor of solitary dumplings. Sweetie, her voice dripped honey, long time no see. I've been afraid to disturb your studies. I offered a non-committal sound. We're planning to send Nina to study abroad, she continued. What do you think? Would you like to go too? Her words catapulted me back to that blood-stained sunset. She'd asked the same question then, and broken by 3 years of torment, I'd desperately agreed. I couldn't bear falling behind Nina again. I was their real daughter. Why was I the cuckoo? Why did the whole family love her? These questions had consumed me until I'd lost myself completely. Mom's expression shifted slightly, the same subtle change I'd seen when I'd chosen Nina's room that first day. My subconscious recognized the pattern. She wasn't asking my opinion, merely performing the role of caring mother. But past me had been too desperate to see it, clinging to any chance to match Nina. Dawn, Mom's patronizing pat accompanied her words, studying abroad isn't easy. There are dangerous people, and your English is poor. You haven't studied well these past years. How could I study without love to nourish me? But I didn't argue, just pleaded. They had money, please send me too. Nina smirked nearby as Dad lit his cigar, speaking with grave authority. It's not about money. Sending you abroad means paperwork, constant worry, too much trouble. Trouble. That's all I was to them. I'll take care of myself, I promised. I won't trouble anyone. Dad's impatient snort cut deep. What do you know? If something happened to you abroad, who would help? Everyone's so busy, use your brain. Their naked disdain finally broke my control. If everyone's so busy, I challenged through tears, aren't you afraid something might happen to Nina abroad with no one to help? You. Dad's face darkened as his cigar snapped. Mom slapped my mouth. How dare you? Don't speak such unlucky words. Nothing will happen to your sister. Right then, Lucas burst in, having flown from the capital at news of Nina's departure. She immediately threw herself into his arms, perfecting her performance. Brother, Dawn cursed me to have accidents abroad. After 3 years of methodical destruction, she'd won so completely she no longer needed subtlety. Her attack was direct, confident of her victory. Lucas's face transformed into something inhuman. Without hesitation, he struck me, the sound echoing through the room. Don Lu, are you begging for death? Blood traced a warm path from my split lip as something deeper shattered inside me. The dam broke. I collapsed into violent sobs, tears and snot streaming unchecked. Like a madwoman, I clawed at my hair, years of suppressed anguish erupting in raw, animal sounds. Why did you hit me? You asked about studying abroad, you asked. You never loved me, not for one moment. You've been waiting for me to die. Is that what you want? Will my death finally satisfy you? They froze, shock melting into rage. Mom's mask of maternal concern cracked. Don Lu, have you lost your mind? Where's your dignity? Dad dismissed the servants with a sharp gesture. Silence. You're a Lu daughter, not some street hysteric. Lucas watched with a cold smirk. The trembling started in my lips, spread to my fingers, consumed my entire body. 3 years, and I still couldn't find a reason to exist. My mind emptied of everything except mechanical sobbing and that one question, will my death finally make you happy? Yes, go die. Lucas's voice carried pure revulsion. Mom and Dad's dismissive waves said everything, get out. The trembling stopped. My heart seemed to crystallize. With strange clarity, I turned and ran upstairs. 5 floors up. No one called after me, no one cared. I burst onto the roof, racing toward the edge. Only after I'd crossed the railing did a maid's scream pierce the air, Miss, don't. They all emerged to watch the show. Parents and brother took their places. Nina's lips curled with barely concealed delight. I stood in the wind, my body alternating between fever and ice. Jump then. When will you grow up? You're 18. Mom's fury centered on the shame I brought her. All these servants watching the Lu family's precious daughter destroy their reputation. How mortifying. Dad's rage robbed him of speech, he could only gesture violently for me to jump. Go on if you dare. Lucas made his attempt at intervention. Clutching Nina, he sneered, don't jump here. You'll stain the tiles. I smiled at the bitter truth of it. Sorry for the mess I'm about to make. Eyes closing, I stepped into empty air. I became a broken thing. Legs shattered like porcelain, brain painting abstract art on pristine tiles, life fleeing in an instant. My spirit hovered, experiencing an unexpected satisfaction. I glared at the meat that had been me and the family gathered around it. If I could have spoken, I would have screamed, look, I'm dead, are you satisfied now? I waited for the regret, the sudden realization that they should have loved me. It never came. Dad shooed away the servants, then shook his head with cold disgust. Childish. Mom trembled but produced no tears. Her lips pressed tight, releasing a deep sigh. Foolish child, so foolish. Relief colored her grief. Her burden had finally fallen away. Lucas shielded Nina while efficiently arranging disposal and cremation. Only Nina cried. Though she shook with apparent terror, triumph gleamed in her eyes. She had won completely. She ruled now as the only Lu daughter. They surrounded her with comfort, assuring her this wasn't her fault. I had chosen my path. I hovered, stunned, as my essence began to fade. Don Lu, you absolute fool. The phantom agony of that death made me shudder. Reality reasserted itself as Mom's voice continued, Sweetie, why so quiet? Mom's asking if you want to study abroad. No. Clipped, controlled, I have class. I need to go. Oh, you never want to trouble us, do you? Mom loves you very much, hoping you'll study abroad. I ended the call. Back to what mattered, studying. As Nina departed for foreign shores, my college entrance exam loomed. For most wealthy children, it was a mere formality. Some didn't even bother. But for me, it represented everything, my watershed moment. I aimed for the nation's most prestigious university as the top scorer. With absolute certainty. Leaving the exam room, tears flowed freely. My deskmate's eye roll was practically audible, crying again. Did you catch your reflection? In my apartment, I studied my image in a recently purchased mirror, my first real one. Before, I'd never owned even a compact. Wash basins had been my only reflection. Now, I took time to really see myself. Not to admire increased beauty or fairness. Simply to acknowledge that this life, at least, had meaning. With my careful savings, I gifted myself an ocean view. My first real journey in 3 years. I captured 2 moments. The endless sea. My unburdened smile. For the first time, I shared them online. Words failed me, so I added a simple grinning emoji. Mom's like came instantly. Her shock was palpable. Dawn, is this really you? A simple sufficed. You've changed so much, is it really you? Changed until even my mother saw a stranger. Dad skipped the like, messaging directly, where are you? Seeing the ocean. His pause preceded judgment. You refused our invitations, but now go alone. It's dangerous. I let silence answer. By evening, Lucas deigned to like the post, graceful as jade, those blue jeans showing through. His words fell into void. Before results were announced, I found work. 2 weeks passed before Mom tracked me through teachers. Her reproach was immediate. Sweetie, why do you always vanish? What if something happened? Come home, you don't need to work. I mentioned tuition costs, university expenses. She laughed dismissively. Does our family lack for money? Of course you do. 3 years of high school, and not once did you offer support. Those homecoming red packets stretched to cover everything. My smile held volumes unsaid. Understanding dawned slowly on her face. Hasn't your father provided living expenses? No. Your brother? Neither. Call ended. The assembly line beckoned. Results day transformed the school into a celebration. I'd done it. Peking University had accepted me. More than that, I was the city's top scorer, worthy of television interviews. My homeroom teacher's joy spilled over in tears as she praised my genius. I smiled serenely. Until I couldn't. Because they had arrived. The teacher's well-meaning invitation had brought my parents for photos. My mother could barely contain her excitement, beaming from ear to ear. Even my father had shed his usual stern demeanor, enthusiastically shaking hands and chatting with various officials. Evidently, being the city's top scholar still carried enough prestige to impress even the wealthy. I slipped away quietly, avoiding the photo session. Outside the school gates, a handsome man stepped out of a sports car. My brother Lucas Liu. Our eyes met and he paused. Weren't Mom and Dad supposed to meet you? Where are you headed alone? Getting lunch, I replied, walking toward a nearby diner. They had my favorites there, mapo tofu for 12 yuan and stir-fried peppers with pork for 13 yuan. Usually, I'd treat myself to one dish per day with my rice. Today I splurged on both, diving right in. Lucas followed me in, coughing from the spicy aromas, covering his nose and mouth as he sat beside me. This is what you're eating? He asked, visibly stunned. I nodded, saying it was delicious. Lucas furrowed his brow, momentarily lost for words. Then he sighed. Nina's living the high life compared to you. She burns through over 200,000 yuan monthly on expenses abroad. Word is she parties non-stop, such a waste. I kept eating my tofu. Seeing my silence, Lucas pulled out a card and offered it to me. As city's top scholar, you've done amazingly well. Let your big brother reward you with 100,000 yuan for college. How generous, half a month of Nina's living expenses. I didn't take it. He left the card on the table, studied me for a long moment, then quietly walked away. I brought Lucas's card back to the villa and left it in the living room. Then I finished packing my last belongings, ready to head north, to the capital where greater opportunities awaited. As I was leaving, Mom and Dad returned. Their faces were dark with anger as they confronted me. Don Lu, why didn't you stay for the photos? The school officials searched everywhere for you. Have you no thought for our reputation? I didn't know about any photos. I explained briefly as I headed for the door. My father took a deep breath, fixing me with an intense stare. My mother suddenly grabbed my hand, tears welling up. Dawn, do you hate us? For 3 years, you've never once smiled at us. Now you've gotten into Peking University, and still you won't share your joy with us. We're your birth parents. Birth parents? I stopped, regarding her coolly, like looking at a stranger. Memories washed over me, settling like still water in a deep well. Not a ripple disturbed the surface. I responded, you misunderstand. I simply don't smile much naturally. Ridiculous. My father exploded, wielding his parental authority. Don Lu, from the moment you returned home, your heart was never with us. We waited 10 years to have you back, hoping to be close to you. Instead, you wear a cold face every day, can't get along with Nina. What do we owe you? Yes, you do owe me. Finally, a ripple stirred in my heart, like a drop of water creating waves. The waves grew larger and larger, building into a tsunami. I stared at my furious father, at my tearful mother. I asked them, if on the day I returned home, I had chosen Nina's room, would you have agreed? They froze, then quickly nodded. Of course. You can stay wherever you like. Then call Nina now, and tell her I want her room. I set down my luggage. My parents stiffened, exchanging glances. It's the middle of the night in America. Nina's probably sleeping. Convenient excuse. I continued, then when you went on that beach vacation, if I had asked you to wait for me, would you have? Of course we would have. Didn't Mom say we'd wait? Your father messed up the tickets. It made me so mad. My mother jumped in. I smiled faintly. That day, I came back, but you had left the day before. My mother's face transformed, as if suddenly struck speechless. I pressed on my 18th birthday. If I had insisted on studying abroad, would I have gotten 200,000 yuan monthly allowance like Nina, living freely overseas? Absolutely, my father declared firmly. Perfect, then I can go abroad now. Please handle the paperwork and let Nina know to expect me. My gaze was unwavering. My father faltered, stammering, that might not be appropriate, maybe we should discuss it with Nina first. After she wakes up. I smiled, picked up my luggage and waved goodbye. No one followed, just two shame-faced people anxiously watching me leave. At Peking University, I threw myself into my studies with even greater determination, because I was determined to become a powerful woman standing at the summit, not a desperate true daughter seeking death. During my sophomore year, Lucas visited the capital on business and stopped by to see me. He immediately started complaining, Nina's completely out of control abroad. God, she's lost her mind. I asked what happened. After much hesitation, he finally revealed through gritted teeth that Nina had embraced all the worst vices from abroad. Drugs, gambling, prostitution, she'd tried everything. Their parents had personally gone to bring her back. I just smiled, saying nothing. That winter of sophomore year, near Chinese New Year, my parents finally returned with Nina. Nina had gone completely wild. She was always trouble, she just hid it better at home. Abroad, with no restrictions and endless money, she naturally went completely off the rails. After returning, she showed zero remorse, partying day and night, even having violent confrontations with our parents. My mother video called me late one night, which I happened to answer while getting up to use the bathroom. On screen, my mother's hair was disheveled, her face swollen, her eyes filled with despair and exhaustion. I asked what happened. She burst into tears. Your sister was out partying at midnight, with 7 or 8 men. It was absolutely disgusting. When I brought her back, she actually hit me. Look at my face. Her face was swollen, almost comically. I remained silent. My mother wiped her tears and continued miserably, your father's away on business, your brother's at the company, I can't control your sister alone. Heaven. My father still wore bandages, his complexion gray and sickly. Lucas's face was twisted with fury, looking murderous. Both their expressions softened into smiles when they saw me. My father warmly greeted me, Dawn, you're here. I wasn't supposed to be discharged yet, but I left early just to see you. I gave a slight nod, remaining silent. Lucas shook my hand, gushing, Miss Dawn Lu, you're quite the celebrity at Peking University, your potential is limitless. Welcome to our humble abode. He thought he was being clever. I felt slightly dazed. The once cold and haughty Lucas actually had such a side to him. Through all these years, past life and present, this was my first glimpse of it. Seeing my silence, Lucas grew awkward and uncomfortable. Mom tried to ease the tension. It's rare to have the whole family together. Come in for dinner. They clustered around me as I entered. I checked the time again and shook my head. I can't stay, I don't want to miss the sunset. I left anyway. After viewing the ocean, I returned to Peking University. Now in my senior year, I had launched a startup with several partners. The path wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. By my second year of graduate school, the business finally flourished, earning me my first 1,800,000 yuan. Life grew increasingly hectic. Balancing both academics and business, I often collapsed into bed exhausted, no longer bothering with any messages from home. After completing my master's degree, my longtime partners and I established our own company, building our reputation. Our earnings weren't extraordinary, certainly nothing compared to my wealthy parents. But it was independently earned, bringing immense satisfaction. It was around this time that I encountered Nina again. She sought me out alone. The moment she saw me, she tried to slap me. Fortunately, I blocked it in time, or she would have left my face swollen. Without hesitation, I slapped her right back. She couldn't dodge and saw stars, blood trickling from her mouth. She spat and snarled, the whole family's thrown me away now, are you satisfied? I pulled out a tissue to wipe my hands, saying nothing. She gritted her teeth, Dawn Lu, you've won. I never imagined your withdrawal from the family was such a calculated move. Retreating to advance, what a ruthless strategy. Been watching too many triad movies? I raised my eyes, weary of this. Ever consider that I distanced myself from the family simply for my own sake? Bullshit. Nina's eyes blazed with fury, Mom and Dad disowning me, brother beating me in public, it's all because of you. They love you now, they've stopped loving me. I shook my head and called the police. They took Nina away. After giving my statement, I informed Mom. When she got my call, her voice quivered with excitement. Dawn, you finally called. You haven't been home for so many years, how are you? I heard you started a company, are you working too hard? I cut her off, come get your daughter. She's at the Chaoyang police station. What? I explained briefly and was about to hang up when Mom burst into tears. Dawn, you're my real daughter. We've driven Nina away. I don't want to bring her home, I want to bring you home. Please? No. I'm busy. No thanks. After being named one of the capital's top 10 outstanding young entrepreneurs, another new year approached. Standing in my CEO office before the floor-to-ceiling windows, I slipped off my heels, poured a glass of red wine, and quietly sipped while admiring the glittering cityscape below. I was 30 now. From 15 to 30, 15 years had passed. It hadn't been an easy journey. Jumping would have been simpler just 3 years. But transforming from a suicidal true daughter into a powerful woman standing at the peak took an extra 12 years. I'm grateful I walked those additional 12 years. In 12 years, much had changed. For instance, Suzhou's leading enterprise, my parents' company, had crumbled. When the tree fell, the monkeys scattered. They hadn't fared well, reportedly even mortgaging their villa. Nina landed in prison. After losing her financial support, she turned to crime and ultimately took a life. 20-year sentence. As for Lucas, attempting a comeback, he arrived in the capital with his last remnants of money to launch a new company. Now he waited outside to see me. From morning until night. My secretary knocked softly. Ms. Liu, that gentleman still refuses to leave. I nodded, set down my wine, slipped on my heels, and walked out. The fallen Lucas hurriedly stood, forcing a servile smile, his eyes filled with undisguised sorrow. Once handsome and commanding, he seemed to have aged 20 years, awkward and stripped of his former pride. Meeting now, he no longer called me Dawn, but Ms. Liu. I had my secretary pour him water and smiled as I spoke. Mr. Liu, I've reviewed your cooperation proposal. I'm sorry, but it doesn't meet our requirements. Lucas forced a dry laugh, his cracked lips moving soundlessly for a moment before he could speak. I stood up. If there's nothing else, I should go. It's getting late. Lucas rose to see me off and suddenly spoke. Sister, Mom, and Dad miss you terribly. Could you visit them? They talk about you every day. I paused. Before I could respond, Lucas sniffled, his voice breaking. You've become so distant. We're family after all, couldn't you not be so cold-hearted? I turned to stare at him, remembering my previous life, how he had dragged me from Nina's room and brutally humiliated me. When I was 15, I never begged you not to be cold-hearted, so you shouldn't beg me now. That was my answer. Lucas froze, his head dropping, all spirit drained. As for me, I strode in my heels under the lazy night sky, softly humming, walking toward my promising future. That broken flesh lying in bloody filth no longer needed to beg for anyone's love. She had gathered her strength to stand up and smile, proudly loving herself.